Star Wars Clone Wars wisdom series that I'm doing. This is episode 13. And so what I do is take the opening statement from that animated series and look at it from the coaching, leadership training lens and see how it applies, if it applies, how well it applies, and my thoughts on what it might mean. Or sometimes I get a little tangential, but whatever. So episode 13. All right, so the opening statement, episode 13, is greed and fear of loss are the roots that lead to the tree of evil. Okay, so I don't want to get all Star Wars geeky on it, but this one is worded in such a way I have to at least address it. In the Jedi Order, right, they talk about fear of loss lead to the dark side, and ooh, that's bad, and that always kind of is like this foreboding thing. In fact, it kind of is part of the storyline, right, of the fall of the Jedi and all that. So I had to at least acknowledge that. So I'm not going to kind of go on that road, but I have to at least acknowledge that this one definitely is taken right from that whole train of thought. Now let's just look at it again: coaching, leadership training, that sort of thing. Okay. So greed. What's interesting about this is they say greed and fear of loss are the roots that lead to the tree. So only two things, right? Greed and fear of loss. Now, we could certainly say, well, actually, there's more, blah blah blah. Okay, fine. Well, I don't want to split hairs, if you will, right? I think they certainly do lead to evil. If you look at greed in its truest form, like a lot of people use that word a little more loosely than I would, but greed. So wanting things just to have them. Not because they serve a purpose to you, but just so that you have more than someone, you have it as opposed to other people having it, right? It gets into some of the vices, there are other words for it, but greed, that's what I think of as greed, right? So you're not doing it as a purpose to serve other people, to have resources available to help serve others is not greedy. And that's where I think it's easy to get confused with, say, in the world of money, right? This is where people get a little lost in how money works, right, with people and how we should view it. Money, in and of itself, is a tool. It is not good or bad, or good or evil. Let's just put it in really stark terms. It's not the money itself that's the problem. It's how we use it. It's how we view it. It's how we relate to it that causes the moral part of it to come into play. Meaning, someone with great intentions and very little money in a society that's run with money, in a capitalistic society, let's say, in general, we all kind of deal with money, whether it's capitalistic or not. So, but I live in a place that's that way, so I'm just going to talk mainly in those terms. Someone with great intentions, with very little money, has a very difficult time, generally speaking, to have influence upon a lot of people. It takes money to get the word out. Advertising, having a platform like this, right? It takes money. Now, luckily, we live in a time, actually, when this is being made, that's fairly easy to do. It's not as prohibitive as it used to be to get a video like this made. Actually, I just need either a cell phone, which most people have at this point, or I can invest in a nicer camera if I feel like it, right? But either one, a camera actually is less than an actual cell phone these days, or an actual computer is what it is that makes phone calls, right? So if you have one of those, you can make videos pretty easily. You get your word out, and there are platforms online in the internet that you can upload it for free if they let you do that. So it doesn't cost a lot of money to have that influence anymore, but it's more difficult, right? It's easier, right, with more money to spread that message wider and have more, quote, influence. At least have the chance to have more influence. So money, in that sense, is a tool for you to get your good intentions, your goodwill to others out to them more easily. And that's a very healthy way to look at, actually, the capitalistic system. Some people view it as very greed-oriented in the negative sense, and those with money are just greedy. They keep it from other people, and they don't share, and whatever. that's actually, if you really talk to people who own businesses or who have started business, that's not their mindset at all. They rarely talk about it in terms of what they're going to gain. They talk about it in terms of how many people they can serve. By and large, there are exceptions to what I just said. There are plenty of people who think what I was saying in the sense of they want to serve. And then there's the exceptions that are just in it to make the money and they don't care about people. Those are very short-term thinkers and they don't last long. That's very common in certain industries, unfortunately. And they just kind of come and go very, very often. Very rarely do they stick around. People that have the intention to serve others rather than just accumulate wealth tend to have more long-lasting effect and have a better business, and they tend to stick around a lot longer. Okay, I'm generalizing, of course, but I've watched that happen in my lifetime, so I can remember plenty of examples of people with decent intentions generally stick around. Now, all the ones that have stuck around don't always have great intentions, right? And that can morph depending on leadership. So I think keeping this in mind is a good idea so that you can keep the longevity of what you're trying to do afloat. Okay, now the fear of loss side is interesting, right? The fear of loss thing is, you can take that a few different ways, right? There's the material loss of things. There's the relationship losing, like losing a relationship with someone or breaking up or things happen so that you don't have a certain job, so all those relationships get quote broken, that you lose those relationships because they're busy doing their thing and now you're off doing something else and you have to spend your time doing what you're doing and not being with the people you were with before. The fear of that, right? Fear of losing that relationship is what they're talking about. It's not the loss. They didn't say the loss. And they didn't say money. They said greed, which is wanting it just to want it, in a very simplistic way to think about it. And the fear of loss, not the loss itself. So losing something doesn't cause you to be evil. Not having something doesn't cause evil. It's inside of what they're saying. I don't think they meant to say this, but the way that it's worded, that's something to really, I think that's a note to pin and think about. It's loss doesn't cause evil. It's the fear of loss that leads to people not acting or acting inappropriately with people so they don't lose something. They have to, hang on to it. So, I'm not going to let you get in the way of that. So I'm going to act in a way, talk in a way, relate to you in a way that's going to keep you at a distance. Right, which is that's not a healthy relationship. Keep people at a distance. It's not going to last forever. Okay, they'll tolerate it, but it's just not going to last forever. So it's that fear of losing whatever it is. If you actually lose it, and you don't take that out on people, but you realize that happened, you just take it as reality. It happened. Now what am I going to do? Am I going to be bitter and mean and nasty to people because of the loss? That's different than the actual loss. So great leaders are able to bounce back from loss very quickly, and they do not fear it. They realize that failure and loss and disappointment are part of the process to learn what there is to learn to become successful. Every endeavor is going to be met with hardship, roadblocks, failures, disappointments, everything, because this is an imperfect world. Things don't go as planned. That's just the way it is. As a young kid, I wish that I didn't really see that, and most young people don't. Very idealistic view of how things work and very kind of black and white and whatever. As you grow older, you realize it's not as clear cut as I thought. So a leader is great at understanding that there's going to be loss, and when you fear it, then you're not acting with 100% of yourself. You're avoiding. You're not engaging as fully as you could if you're fearing the loss of something. Okay. So now this whole leading to the tree of evil thing, right? So they're the roots, and roots nourish, right? Roots are the things that pull the minerals and things from the ground, let's just go with the analogy, and feed it to the rest of the plant. So they're the things that gather what's needed for the rest of the plant. So if you're building a tree of evil, like evil, things that are, doing harm to others, doing bad things, causing upset in situations, people, whatever, right? You're the cause of it. You get a twisted pleasure out of causing harm. That's evil, right? So that's what I'm going to say. That's a version of evil. So if the roots of that are greed and fear of loss, one way to help avoid becoming that way, and that's sort of the point of this, right? It's the whole point of this. How to avoid becoming someone who finds a twisted pleasure in harming a situation or people or things is work to eradicate greed. Don't be afraid of losing because you can rebuild. Understanding that instead of there having and I'm going to get to kind of a way to wrap this up in one thought, and it all kind of gelled as I was talking here. So anyway, understanding that there's going to be loss and to not fear it, not to embrace it like, oh great, I lost something, great, awesome. That's not what I'm saying, but just knowing, yep, there it is. Knew it was going to come up sometime, didn't know when, but here it is, great. Now what are we going to do? If people are upset, let's deal with the upset. I understand, I'm not happy about it either, etc. So having the conversation to handle the emotional component as quickly as you can, not to just handle people, but just, let's acknowledge that it's a loss, right? It's kind of you gotta go through that grieving process of any loss. There is a grieving process that human beings go through. And so going through that, right? And helping others through that. And then, okay, here we are. We're at this point now. What's the next best move? Let's figure that out together. That's actually good leadership. Working through loss rather than fearing it and then avoiding what you need to, and then things just get convoluted or not discussed, and then it just kind of falls apart on its own, and then the blaming begins, right? So that's what I'm talking about, like just not fearing loss is you embrace it in the sense of you're going to handle it with grace. Okay. So if you eradicate greed and then you stop fearing loss, you won't build those roots. You'll build other roots, right? It'll build roots of a different kind of tree. Tree of harmony, maybe. Tree of love. I wouldn't call it love, but maybe tree of harmony, tree of peace, tree of integrity. It could be you could say it lots of different ways, but it certainly wouldn't be a tree of evil. So now the thought I had about putting it all together has escaped me. So, greed, fear of loss. Oh, man, there was something in there. I apologize. Wow, there was a cool thought I had, and it's escaped me because I was trying to tie up all that other stuff. I don't think it's going to come back. So I guess we'll have to leave it at that in the sense of I apologize. There was a thought in there. And these are, like I said, these are kind of, I don't prepare these. I don't write these out as speeches. I just give my thoughts on them. If it comes up again, I'll throw out a little supplement on this and say, oh yeah, I remember that thought. But for now, we'll just leave it at that this is very appropriate, and depending on how far you want to take the analogy, it definitely works. So we want to nurture the things that help us grow in the way that we want to nurture relationships. So there you have it. Greed and the fear of loss are the roots that lead to the tree of evil. Great thing to keep in mind, and a decent analogy to kind of remember that that's what we're building. We're building a tree in our life, and what is that tree going to be when it's all said and done? What are we going to leave behind as a tree, as a legacy? Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.